All right, welcome back to The Art of Show. This week, we're hanging out with someone super special. If you guys have ever seen movies like Beauty and the Beast, the old school version, Lion King, Aladdin, or Mulan, this guy had a part in them. In fact, he was actually the supervising animator on Mushu. This week, we're talking with Tom Bancroft.
Welcome to The Art of Show, where we feature the people who are creating amazing stories for kids. Join us as we chat with children's book illustrators and authors, storyboardists, animators, and more. Now, their art might be for kids, but aren't we all just kids at heart? Here's your host, Brandon.
All right, guys, welcome back. If you guys are listening to this live the day this comes out, May the 4th be with you. Happy Star Wars Day. Hope you guys are having a blast out there. It's fun to see a bunch of different Star Wars related artwork in my Instagram feed. But I've also been seeing a bunch of other different things in my Instagram feed lately, and that is mermaids, and that is because of the guy we're talking with this week, Mr. Tom Bancroft. He started an art challenge last year called May, and the whole idea was basically you draw a mermaid every single day in the month of May. This is kind of built off of Jake Parker's Inktober. We had Jake on the podcast a couple months ago now, where you draw something in ink every day in October. That got super big, and so Tom's like, hey, I want to do my own kind of twist on that. So we started it last year, and it has grown from there. What's really cool is not only is he doing a mermaid every day, but it's actually part of a children's book story. So I saw that pop up, and so each day you can follow along, and he's got a different page of this story, which is really fun and really neat. And he's also just dropping in other people's artwork, which is always really fun to see. So literally, I go through Instagram right now, and other than Star Wars, I'm seeing lots of mermaids. But Tom is not just known for making mermaids. Actually, that is probably one of the least known things that he does because he is pretty famous, especially in the animation world. He is a longtime animator at Disney. He was actually there with his twin brother, Tony. You're also the host of the incredible Bancroft Brothers podcast, which really dives into the history of Disney. It's a really great one if you guys like anything on that side of things, especially more on the traditional 2D animation side, and kind of the 90s and the 80s of Disney animation. Really, really good stuff. I encourage you guys to check it out. There is a link below or a link in the show notes if you guys are listening on iTunes. The interview was a blast. We got into his character design process. He's got a couple books out. One is Character Mentor, which I have, and it walks you kind of through his character design process, not just the nuts and bolts of like, how do you draw a girl or how do you draw a dragon, but like, how do you get into the character's mind, and what are different tools you can use to approach the character. And so he gets into it. We chat a good bit about Mushu because he was the supervising animator on Mushu in Mulan, which is one of my favorite characters of all time from Disney movies. And so he gets into like, why did we make him super skinny and why did we add these different elements to him? And so it's really fun and interesting if you're doing anything with characters, even if you're writing characters, just how you can approach characters and how they look. He does a great job with it. And so we even get into a little bit why he left Disney and what he's doing now. All right, and if you guys want to follow along with Mermaid, you can check out Tom's Instagram feed over at Tom Bancroft1 on Instagram as well as Twitter. There's tons of links to the show, so make sure and check out the show notes, whether that is in the description below on YouTube, which if you guys like this, give me a thumbs up, give me a like, that would be awesome. Or on iTunes, you can do that as well. Or head over to brandoncullum.com/29, and that will take you right to the show notes. So without further ado, let's dive into our interview with Tom Bancroft. All right, guys, well, welcome back to The Art of Show. We're excited to hang out with a legendary animator, Mr. Tom Bancroft, hanging out with us. We're excited, but you've done so many different things, and one thing we're going to get into today is you're doing a fun monthly art project called Mermaid, and I was listening to maybe an interview or reading a little bit earlier, and you talked about when you were younger that drawing girls especially, like you were intimidated by it, and so... at what point did it kind of switch for you? Like, I love creating this and creating mermaids,
That's
especially.
a good question. Yeah. I think drawing attractive women, and obviously that's in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah.
But just in general, appealing, let's put it that way, appealing women. It's hard for everybody. I mean, let's face it. Sorry, you're not, and especially as a guy, I think you're not born with that at all.
Yeah.
Even as as an artist, you don't quite get it. We never get women.
Yeah.
So even artistically. So I discovered that I was not drawing women like most people on purpose because I was uncomfortable. They never turned out good. They look kind of manly. And I've heard women, by the way, I have a lot of female students right now. I teach at Lipscomb University, and a lot of them don't feel comfortable drawing men. So it's not a one-sided thing. So I just think that it's something you have to practice at. And so when I was at Disney, I kind of started, I found the drawings of Freddie Moore. Freddie Moore was one of the old Disney animators. He liked to draw kind of pretty women a lot too, kind of on the side, but also some of that went into his work at Disney. He did a lot of the centaurettes in Fantasia, and a lot of those Little Mermaid characters and Peter Pan, well before the original Mermaid. And so he kind of got known as sort of the girl guy, he could draw really cute girls. And so I saw a lot of those drawings, and I started kind of going, well, this would be great. I'd love to, this is kind of maybe my way in, is just look at his work and start practicing that kind of a style, very simplified, a lot of flow to the body. And I just started doing it all the time. And really that's what it took, was just, and now I'm to the point where I would rather draw girls than guys, and they certainly get more attention on Instagram. I hate to say it, but I also have 4 girls. So I'm like outnumbered in my family. I have a wife and 4 girls. So it's girl stuff is very much around me all the time, as far as we're watching chick flicks all the time. We're watching, and I must admit, I gave into it years ago too. And just now I like all that stuff too. So I'm all man, but I just, so the mermaid thing is not strange for me.
Yeah, that's funny. I draw a little bit on the side too, and I was drawing the back of a girl's hair the other day. My wife was like, hair doesn't do that. Like, we never put like our like braids that way. I'm like, I have no idea. I'm just doing it the best I does it.
Well, and that's a great point, because even those little things that, as a guy, we don't think about it, but there's a way that hair works. And when you pull it back, and I remember going down that road too, that's sort of like, after trying to just draw women's bodies and poses and things like that, the next phase is also like, now I got to understand their hair and how that works. And then fashion, I still haven't gotten to fashion. So I'm not very good at that.
Yeah, that's good. Well, we'll kind of jump back to the beginning. Since when you were growing up, was art a part of your story? Was that something that was part of your family story? Kind of how did you get into it?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely started early, and I have a twin brother, identical twin brother, and we drew together all the time. His name's Tony. We also have a podcast, and I'm sure we're going to mention that later, but it's the Bancroft Brothers Animation Podcast. We both worked at Disney. I won't get into that a lot, but as far as, us growing up, we started drawing about the same time. We had a babysitter when we were pretty young that drew these really imaginative stick figures. And that's all they were, was stick figures. But she would add clothes on them and kind of put them in poses. And like, now it's an Indian because it has a feather coming out the back. It was like very simple stuff. We have some of these drawings still. But to us, it was sort of like, she just made those few lines in that circle into a character. It sort of, and she would sort of tell little stories like, now this Indian has got a bow and it's hunting. And to us, that was like magic. And I know that, since then and ever, that people do that all the time. And I don't know why, but it hit us at a certain time where we were really kind of just starting to understand drawing and art. And like I said, we were very young. And Mad Magazine kind of started becoming an influence in our lives around that time. And so we just started noticing art and drawing. And so we started sketching all the time. And then we got very competitive, of course, between the two of us. And always trying to, and then the Peanuts comic strip by Charles Schulz was huge, and because this was during the early 70s, and that was sort of a heyday for the Peanuts comic strip, and then later on Garfield, and later on after that Calvin and Hobbes. But so we really got into comic strips also, and we're doing that, and started doing some in high school, our own comic strips, writing our own characters and things like that. So it was just that natural evolution. But yeah, we didn't really have anybody directly in our family that was artistic. It just Tony and I just sort of picked it up, and the competition between us kind of fueled it.
Yeah, yeah. At what point did it ever switch for you where like I can make a career out of this? Like this is something I could do for the rest of my life?
Yeah, it did, but it was kind of late. Like nowadays I'm always jealous of, kids today because they have the internet. And they can do a Google search on, I want to draw a raccoon. What's a raccoon look like? Oh, here's about 1,000 pictures of a raccoon from every angle, you know? And we just didn't have that. So, like I said, in the late 60s when we were very young, but, mostly during the 70s, when we were drawing a lot, that didn't exist. And you literally had to go to the library and look into an encyclopedia and look up raccoon. And literally there would be maybe one or two or photos of a raccoon. And that's all you had, unless you found another book that was all about raccoons. But if you're like, I got to find a side view or a side 3/4 back view, because that's what I need for this illustration or whatever, especially later on when we were in junior college, you were out of luck. You kind of had to make it up, or maybe you found that one picture that every other illustrator in the world also found, and they've already copied it. I don't know. It was a totally different world. Yeah. So and now I've lost track. What was your question?
Yeah. Was there a point there where it switched where you're like, oh man, I could do this the rest of my life. Like I could get paid to create art.
And that's where I'm working toward. Yeah. Is that back in those days, a lot of people have to understand that there wasn't all these sort of making of videos. Mm-hmm. There wasn't art of books and things like that, about how animation is done, or even, the art of, Aladdin, something like that, where you'd see a lot of, animation drawings and things like that, and understand that, oh wow, this is a job. So it wasn't until we were, a few years out of high school that we started realizing that, wait a second, there's a career to animation. We only knew comic strips because Schultz had gotten a lot of publicity. He was good about doing a lot of TV shows and stuff, even during the 70s. And he seemed to be the go-to guy when somebody wanted to talk about, what's the day in the life of a cartoonist like? They'd go to Schultz and they'd show him at his ice rink sketching and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so we were fascinated by him, of course. The whole world was at the time. But so you kind of understood as a kid growing up that, their comic strip artists made a living, because that had been going on for a good 50, 80, 100 years before that. And so people knew them as sort of rock stars. They were the first kind of artistic rock stars out there, where it was Norman Rockwell and then all these cartoonists, and so people kind of knew them as household names. And then of course Disney, you knew him, but you didn't know all the other names. Sorry.
You're good.
But you didn't know all the other animators and stuff behind Disney, because they didn't publicize that back in the day. And so just kind of fell into it, actually through clay animation. So we were big fans of, around that time, Will Vinton came out with these commercials, heard it through the grapevine, the California Raisins.
Yeah.
And they're really popular at the time all over, not only California where we were growing up, but all over the country. And so those commercials actually were what got us into animation. Our first thing we did was clay animated stop motion.
Oh, that's cool. That's really cool. So I've talked with several folks that have worked with their siblings or their significant others. I don't think I've ever talked to twins before. Did you guys ever play pranks on folks? Whether it's at Disney or did you ever just switch roles for a day and just mess with folks?
No, you know what? We did it once,
okay.
And it was only because, and it was in high school, our senior year. Enough of our friends had, kind of said that same thing, like, "Oh, have you done that before?"
Yeah,
and we were always like, "No, I've never really thought about it. No, I don't want to go to his class, and he doesn't want to go to my class." But we had that question come up so many times. We were like, "Okay, let's just do this," and kind of so we could say we did and all that. And so we did. We switched. I think I had a science class that Tony went to, and then I went to his English class or something. And we had one of our best friends was in that English class, so he was the only one that was in on it. And at the time we had hair, and we the only difference was that we parted our hair on different sides.
Okay.
So we went into the bathroom beforehand and changed our hair, and that was about, I think, all we did. Maybe I'm not sure we had glasses at the time. So that was about all we did. Maybe we changed the shirts too. And yeah, sure enough, the teachers didn't know. But a couple of the students that were kind of closer to us, more friends, they knew and they were kind of in on it. And then, but yeah, it was funny because in that class, I remember sitting there and my friend who sat, a friend of both me and Tony, he sat in front of me and he kept trying to kind of give it away, and he was like, "Oh, so Tony, how's it going? Are you enjoying your English class? Well, you wouldn't want to be in science right now, would you?" It was all that kind of stuff. And I was like, "Hey, keep it down." I was like, sweating it out. I didn't want to get caught. And sure enough, so this other kid who sat next to Tony, that I was now sitting next to, he goes, "Oh yeah, I've seen your brother and you guys before. I could tell you guys, you don't even look alike to me." And so he didn't realize he was talking to the other twin.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's good.
It worked.
That's really good.
We did.
Yeah. Well, I know I could ask you tons of questions about Disney. I'm having to hold back because I know I want to focus on that. But the one thing I did want to ask from your experience from it, and I encourage you, those listening to definitely check out your podcast because you guys feature tons of folks from Disney and you guys created the Bancroft brothers, and there'll be a link in the show notes. But thinking through it through the character design aspect. And so you supervised on Mushu with Mulan, and I was reading an interview and you talked about getting into the mind of the character, and you almost work just as much to remove things from the character in your design, which I don't think I've heard it explained that way quite before. So like maybe elements that you wouldn't include to kind of get towards the core. How was that with Mushu or with any of the other characters you've designed? That process.
You dropped out there, so I missed you were saying what? That there's elements that you don't put in?
Yeah, there was an interview I was reading or I was listening to, and you mentioned when you're kind of getting into the world of the character that some of the work is just figuring out what this character isn't versus just figuring out what this character is. So what were maybe some ideas with Mushu? You were like, this isn't him. This isn't towards his identity.
Well, and that was. Yeah, so in Mulan, I was a supervising animator, and that meant I got to design the final version of Mushu, and that was a great honor. It was the first time I did that at Disney, and since then I've written a couple character design books, creating characters with personality and character mentor. So I've kind of analyzed this in my head, of how I work personally, but also, suggesting ways for people to design characters. And to me, that's a big part of it is when you get a new assignment and here's the script and here's the description of the character, because there's always some information. It's usually not just, hey, invent a character and we'll make a movie about him or a comic strip or whatever. There's some kind of if it's for a client, there's definitely thoughts and, things that are already needed, for that whatever that project is. So, I like to at least kind of start really thinking about it and going, okay, but what do I not want to do? Because to me, it's a nice way to get into a project. And it sounds kind of negative or limiting, but it's not in my mind. I just want to go, okay, what are the obvious things that I know about this character that are one needs, but also what does that nix out? How many designs am I going to save time and not do because I know that doesn't fit in this? And then I go down the road of sort of like, you do kind of start with the obvious choices first. With Mushu, I knew that he was going to be long and thin and snake-like, and that's very different from the European dragons that are more like crocodiles and thick, like in Sleeping Beauty and things like that. So I already knew he was going to look unique in the Disney pantheon of dragons because of the long, skinny Chinese dragons are very different than European. And so that was something I knew I was going to do. I had to have a thin, long, snake-like body. And that was good. But then I also as I go down that road and I start developing the character, then I start kind of maybe easing in some of those things that I said I wouldn't do. You know what I mean? Like sometimes I throw some of those back in there and go, okay, but what if he was skinny but had a little belly, because he's lazy,
Yeah.
And then I start going, well, and that doesn't necessarily apply to Mushu.
Yeah.
But that's how I then start going, because you want to break some of the rules maybe and to get the best character. And so it's not like I divorce myself from I'm never going to go down this road over here. But I at least do at the beginning and get kind of an idea. And then I start opening up to, yeah, but what if it was completely different than that, you know? And so we did that with Mushu. I mean, like I had a design that was like 80% there probably. And some of it was based on some of those story development artists and story artists that had already done some designs. But then we started going, well, maybe we need to go even more unique though. Maybe, you know, we've gone down this road. How would Dr. Seuss do this? You know? And so I started doing some really fantastic, you know, crazy looking Mushus that were completely different. And we tried it, and yeah, nope, that didn't really work. That doesn't look like the rest of the film at all. So, but sometimes going down that crazy road, you go, well, but I like how these horns came out, and there's some little piece that ends up into the final design. And so, yeah, we did kind of come back to where we were, I think, with Mushu. But some of that, and the colors, the bright colors and stuff, some of that from that Dr. Seuss era that only lasted a week or two in his design process, still could work in there, but in a smaller way.
Yeah,
so
that's good. That's real cool. Well, moving from Disney, because I know a lot of folks listening, they'll be like, man, Disney, that's like the pinnacle. Like I want to get there, or working at Pixar. But you moved on to something different. What was it in you that kind of decided I'm going to make a transition out of Disney into the stuff, maybe more the stuff that you're doing today?
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm at that point where I can almost cut my career in half. And so that first 12 years was working at Disney on all these great films, and what a blessing that was. And it really was the launch pad for the second half of my career because, you know, now I could say, oh, I worked at Disney, you know, and people care about that. But so I did start my own company with a buddy of mine, and we ran that together for about 7 years. And we started doing development for animated shows, for children's books. You know, it was basically anything kid-centric, in video games and music videos and stuff like that. And it's the kind of stuff that you could do remotely because I live in Nashville, Tennessee now, and I have for the last 12 years. Like I said, that's sort of my second half of my career. But I left Disney really kind of to follow my heart. I really sort of saw the writing on the wall of CG animation and things like that. And I knew, so part of that was my decision of I want to stay drawing. I love drawing. And that's why I got into animation. It wasn't really, I do love bringing a character to life, but I can do that with even just character design and comic books and a lot of different ways. And so it wasn't a deal breaker for me to feel like I have to animate every day, but I did need to design a character or draw a character or do a comic book or something with a character every day. And that has been sort of what's defined the second half of my career. It's not just having to actually animate it, but which was my day job at Disney for so many years. But now just creating a character or a story with a character, that's kind of what's defined the second half of my career. And so that's kind of my journey so far. And so that second half of the career was more about character design. I've done a lot more character design in the last 12, 15 years than animation.
Gotcha. That's cool. That's real cool.
Yeah.
Well, getting into drawing every day and kind of transitioning into Mermaid, for those that may not know what's going on. And this episode, actually, we're recording this on Wednesday the 3rd. So I'll actually put this out tomorrow, so we get it early in May. So
good.
On Star Wars Day. But so where did the inspiration come from it? And so you draw a mermaid every day in the month of May. Is that right? Using the hashtag mermaid.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And the best way to equate mermaid is to Inktober. I mean, Jake Parker created Inktober. And almost everybody knows about that. It's huge. It's been going for, I'm guessing he's been doing it for 5 years, maybe. But he's been doing it for a while, and it just grows every year. It seems like, and it's same motivation, which is draw every day. You know, that's to encourage artists to draw every day, and at least for 1 month, try and concentrate on getting as many drawings out and posting them every day. And then also it gives you the benefit of now you got a nice gallery. When you hit that hashtag Inktober, now you can see what everybody else is doing. And that's really pretty cool. So Mermaid is an offshoot of that. in that because I don't think I would have thought of it had I not known about Inktober. But how it started is, I guess, even not very clear to me. I had drawn some mermaids. I remember that, and realized, and they got a really good response on Instagram. And it wasn't like Ariel. I designed a few of my own and just put them up. And maybe I did it a couple days in a row. I can't remember. But I just remember somebody saying, oh man. And I think I even said in the comments, like, oh, I think I'd love to do a month of mermaids.
Huh.
Maybe I'll do that. And then that got people in the comments going. And then somebody actually said, oh, you can call it Mermay. And I think because May was about to come up. And I may have waited a year. I can't remember if I was early enough that I could start it, because Mermay started last year. This is our second year doing it. So I just created #Mermay and launched it last year and said, this is what we're going to do. We're going to draw a mermaid every day. And I found, obviously, I would say that girls are more attracted to drawing mermaids than men. So it's a little odd that I'm doing it. But I have found that everybody enjoys looking at them. Everybody enjoys, the variety, because there as many fish there is under the sea as how many mermaids you can have.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of us kind of get stuck on Ariel or something like that, and a version of Ariel. And I must admit, a lot of mine end up looking kind of like that. But there's so many different variations that you can do. I think it's kind of endless. And so just that sort of mystique. And then some people go to the monster route and go back to what the mermaids used to, the original version of a mermaid is pretty scary, really. They were luring sailors out of the boats, basically, seducing them to come into the water so they could drown them and eat them, and that's where mermaids really came from, is that they were monsters.
Yeah.
But we've kind of made them in these cute little teen girls now, I guess. But so anyway, this year, and this is where the evolution has come, is that, so last year it was just, I posted a mermaid every day in the month, and I actually inked them, and I ended up putting out a coloring book, an adult coloring book of all my mermaid pieces, and you can find that on Amazon.
Okay, we'll link that.
Yeah. But this year I thought, how am I going to make this different? And it really became a big goal for me personally, was to sort of make a project out of mermaid. And that was kind of a goal. Like, I kind of did it on the back end, why I did the 30 mermaids last year, and I just, I'll put it together as a coloring book, because I'd inked them all. So I had all the black and white artwork for it, and that worked out nice. But it wasn't like I had that planned. You know what I mean? It just sort of like, oh, now I'm going to put this together at the end, and that worked out. But this time I had a conversation with a friend of mine, J. Scott Campbell, who's a comic book artist, and he's a great marketer. We had him on our podcast, and he was really kind of throwing it down in that podcast to talk to all artists, but I was listening closely in my heart, that as artists, we should be not just posting fan art all the time, that we should be creating our own characters and worlds and stories. And it hit me at a time where I really felt like I needed to be doing that more, because I do that to some degree, but I wasn't really doing it as much as I should. And so I thought, how can I use Mermaid this year to do that? And so that's when I came to the idea of, I've already had a couple characters I wanted to do, and one of them was a mermaid. And so I just thought, I'm going to go further with that character and develop it and give it a name and a personality. And then I thought, well, I'll just write a story. And so that's when it hit me to go, well, maybe this year for Mermaid, I could actually tell a story in about 30, pages and post one every day. And so, but obviously I'd have to write the story up front and then start illustrating it probably in April, a little bit early, and to get a head start, and then start posting them. And I was assuming I would just post black and white, but then my friend Jeremiah Skipper, who's now a professional comic book colorist for DC Comics, he offered to color them all.
Oh, that's cool.
And he did that for my first mermaid last year, colored pretty much every single one of my mermaids. And he does a great job. And so now I'm posting color, like a finished children's book every day in May.
That's cool. Now, is your goal to actually put that out then so folks can purchase it at the end?
Yeah, for
That's
sure.
Cool.
I don't know how I'm going to do that yet. I'm kind of hoping some publishers will approach me. I've done a couple successful Kickstarters, so that is an option to maybe do it as a Kickstarter and publish the book. But my wife would kill me if I did a third one, I think. I don't know if that's an option, but I am talking to at least one publisher right now about possibly, doing that, because I don't. This isn't obviously the best way to view a book. It's one day, reading it over 30 days.
Yeah.
And it's definitely for kids. And by the way, it's called The Mermaid Who Wanted to Fly, and that's the title of the story. And it has Lonnie is my Polynesian mermaid that I designed for the story, and it's all about her desire to fly, and obviously that's not what she's meant to do.
Yeah.
And I kind of there's an adult, and I haven't really said this much in the postings because I'm only about two or three pages in at this point on the story, but there's an adult side to the story. Like there's some symbolism about dreams, and especially in my mind, artistic dreams of, I want to work at Disney one day, or I want to work at Pixar, or I want to work and be whatever, a successful illustrator. How do I get there? And so I've really written this story as an analogy, I guess, or the symbolic side of it is, as adults, how do we reach our dreams, and how's the best way to do that? And for Lonnie, she has this impossible dream. And it's a mermaid that wants to fly. And so I think just being a professional artist is, for a lot of people, like this impossible dream. And so that's my analogy in this story is for adults, is that there's this symbolic story to it.
That's cool. That's really cool. Well, I don't want to take up a ton of your time. I know you're super busy, but for folks that are listening and maybe they want to follow along, whether with Mermaid or with your work, any good places to send them?
Yeah, for sure. Instagram is Tom Bancroft 1, the number 1, and same with Twitter, Tom Bancroft 1. On Facebook, my brother and I have a fan page, so it's just the Bancroft Bros on Facebook. So follow us there and like that. And that you'll see a lot about what, our podcasts, of course, but also other things that interest us that we upload. Those three are the big ones. I do have a website too, though, tombancroftstudio.com. And that's a good place to go. I sell original artwork there sometimes, but I also have my art. I have an Art of Tom Bancroft book that I did as a Kickstarter. You can buy it there in the store.
Oh, cool.
A lot of other things. You can get my Mermaid coloring book. It'll send you to Amazon, but you can buy it there too.
Well, very cool. Well, I appreciate your time and everything that you continue to do, your teaching, and I have your the Creating Characters with Personality book is actually at home right now. So
awesome.
Yeah, so that was a blast to go through. But thank you so much for what you continue to do, and look forward to seeing more things for the future.
Well, this was fun. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
Well, thank you. All right.
Thanks.
Bye now.